What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a quick update from the Rebel Walk. Austin Eldridge here with you, and wanted to kind of go over what's been happening today and kind of where Ole Miss baseball stands as we know it for the postseason right now. It is still a very edge of your seat wait for the Rebels, and it's going to be that way until Monday at 11 o'clock when the selection show starts. Nothing really the Rebels can do, obviously, and that's the unfortunate part of not taking care of business on the field. But what we know right now is that there have been a lot of games that have affected where Ole Miss stands over the weekend, and none more so far than the one that happened already this morning with Florida beating Alabama 11-6 in an elimination game in the SEC tournament. The general consensus that we're getting from what we know with the people at the main sources of like D1 baseball and Baseball America and things of that nature, the general consensus is that it would be Ole Miss or Alabama. One of those two teams, if one of them is going to get in, it's going to be either or. It's not going to be both, is the general idea that we are getting. However, it could be both if it's a 10-bid league, and Alabama may or may not have done enough this week. That is yet to be seen. But with Alabama losing to Florida today in the elimination round, the general consensus was they needed at least one more win to ensure that they were in the tournament. And with that loss to Florida, that in all likelihood could knock them out. Now, before Alabama played Florida this morning, the latest projections from D1 baseball had Alabama as the 3 seed in Hattiesburg in the Southern Miss Regional. And Ole Miss was out. They were the first 4 out. They were number 66. They were in the first 4 out, along with Old Dominion and Kentucky, which are two of the other teams we've been keeping a close eye on. Now, Kentucky has an opportunity to sneak their way in still. They're still in the SEC tournament. They've got a big game coming up with LSU. The winner of that game will take on Tennessee later on today. If Kentucky wins that game, things get a little tighter again for Ole Miss. Now, with Baseball America, they had Ole Miss in as the 3 seed in Hattiesburg this morning, still had them in the tournament. So the sources differ a little bit. Now, when you look at the resume, and what I'm going to do in just a moment is I'm going to go over where they stand right now and also a little bit of what Mark Etheridge had to say as he's been doing the bubble watch, so to speak, throughout the weekend with teams like Ole Miss and UTSA and Old Dominion and a couple of those other teams that we've been keeping an eye on. Now, a big factor that we may or may not have been thinking about, a lot of people don't realize there's other tournaments going on besides the SEC tournament that we have to be aware of, and that is over in the Missouri Valley. Dallas Baptist got crushed yesterday by Evansville. That conference is now projected to be a 2-bid league, including Dallas Baptist, and the winner of that conference that would get the at-large bid, or the automatic bid rather, is no longer projected to be Dallas Baptist, which would mean that whoever wins that conference would be a bid thief, which could, in essence, eliminate Ole Miss yet again. Michelle asks, do we need LSU to win? Yes, we do. We need LSU to win. Kentucky, right now, their RPI is not there in the sense of where Ole Miss is in. They're not inside that top 40. But yes, we do need LSU to win. Kentucky winning provides another kink in Ole Miss's chances. Right now, if you look at the RPI from both D1 Baseball and Warren Nolan, Ole Miss is sitting at 37. Now, if you take that number inside of 40, is considered inside the bubble. That is where you want to be as far as making the tournament, is that mark, 40 or higher. And Ole Miss is there. They've kind of gone on a little bit between that 37 and 40 mark throughout the weekend, but they have yet to drop out of that top 40. So they're in good shape as far as the RPI goes. And we all know that RPI is a big deal when it comes to the committee supposedly making their selections. But then if you take what D1 Baseball had to say this morning, where Ole Miss is out of the field, it makes you wonder, how much are they going to take the RPI into consideration, and how much are they going to look at what Ole Miss did down the stretch? Regular season, Ole Miss won 8 of their last 10 games. They lost 2 out of 3 to Texas A&M, but they swept LSU. They swept Missouri. They won 8 of their last 10, including the win they had over Texas A&M. And then they went 0-1 in the SEC. But the team they lost to at the SEC tournament was Vanderbilt. So that's going to be key. And Vanderbilt's RPI obviously is in the top 10. Vanderbilt proceeded to be eliminated, however, already in the tournament by losing to Tennessee and Kentucky back-to-back. So Vanderbilt is no longer in the tournament. Again, that's another reason we got to keep our eye on Kentucky, because they are still playing in Hoover. And it just comes down to how much is the committee going to keep an eye on who is still alive at the SEC tournament. Resume-wise, Ole Miss did very well this season as far as top 25 RPI wins. They had 7 of them, which is within the top 4, top 5 of the SEC in that number. Their conference record is 14-16. It's 14-17 if you take the aggregate. Alabama's conference record without the SEC tournament is 12-17. If you look at that on paper, you wonder why on earth is Alabama even in the conversation. They have 12 SEC wins. Well, it's because the aggregate, which they do look at times, is 14-17, 14-18, I guess, technically now, after losing to Florida, and their RPI is right up there. However, Alabama's RPI has dropped all the way down to 46 after the loss to Florida. So that is helpful to Ole Miss. However, Ole Miss was swept by Alabama in the regular season. So it's just a never-ending circle of what is the most important thing to the committee. Is it going to be RPI where it stands, or is it going to be what happened as a whole throughout the regular season? RPI, we know, is a flawed tool. It's a flawed mechanism. They use it to an extent that it makes you wonder how some of these teams make it in the tournament. And this Ole Miss and Alabama debate is a prime example of that. If you just looked at the records on paper, 32-22 for Ole Miss, 14-17 in the conference, 14-16 without the tournament, it makes you wonder, is that really a viable resume? But the RPI is there, especially when they look terrible there for a 4-week stretch. So the RPI is definitely a flawed tool. I expect there maybe to be some changes made to that over the next couple of years, but we'll see. That's a big talk between with Kendall Rogers and Mark Etheridge and some of the experts at D1 baseball. Now, what Mark Etheridge in his bubble watch today, here are the games we got to keep an eye on if you're an Ole Miss fan, that you really have to hope that one team in particular loses. Now, we already saw Alabama lose. That was big for Ole Miss's hopes today. Dallas Baptist and Southern Illinois, that one's over in the Missouri Valley. Dallas Baptist has to win 4 consecutive games at this point to win their tournament and avoid the MVC getting a bid thief. That's a big deal for Ole Miss. So I'll be keeping up with that particular conference as well. And of course, you've still got UTSA and Southern Miss. That game is huge. Southern Miss, Ole Miss beat them late in the regular season, and they have a great RPI. If they win the Conference USA tournament as they are expected to do, that would seriously help Ole Miss's chances. Texas San Antonio right now, who they are playing, their RPI is right there with Ole Miss at 42. They're right in that range. A win over Southern Miss eliminates Southern Miss and also ensures that someone else from the Conference USA is going to steal that bid, the automatic bid. Southern Miss is in the tournament regardless. You don't want someone else getting that automatic bid besides Southern Miss from Conference USA, because that would seriously damage Ole Miss's chances yet again. Also over in that same area, you've got Old Dominion, who was also there with Ole Miss in the first 4 out. They've got a big game today in Conference USA play. They have got to lose for Ole Miss. You want them losing for Ole Miss to have a chance to be in. So those are teams you got to keep an eye on as the day goes along. And I'll give you a quick scoreboard update momentarily once I get that pulled up. And again, Kentucky versus LSU is another big one that Ole Miss has to keep an eye on. Now, according to Mark Etheridge, here are the teams that are on the bubble right now coming into this morning. Rutgers, their RPI is 39, 43, and 14 overall. Louisiana Tech, their RPI is 41, 40, and 18 overall. And then you have UTSA, 42 RPI. West Virginia, 45 RPI. Alabama, 43 RPI. Old Dominion, 46. Ole Miss, 38. Clemson, 34. Kentucky, 53. Penn is 54. Pittsburgh is 64, but they're playing for a potential automatic bid out of their conference. That's another potential bid thief in the ACC. Louisiana at 57 and Iowa at 62. According to Mark Etheridge, there are room for 5 of those teams right now. Alabama is, in all likelihood, out of the tournament now. that takes one of those away. You still got quite a few teams there, though, that and some of whom are still playing, and Ole Miss is not. A lot of bubble teams to keep an eye on today as we go throughout the day. I'm going to get you a scoreboard update here momentarily, and we're going to see how things are going in the Conference USA. That's the big one that we're really keeping an eye on, along with Kentucky and LSU going on right now. In Conference USA action, as I'm pulling it up right now, Old Dominion and Louisiana Tech are tied at 6 as we speak, and that game is in extra innings. So if you're an Ole Miss fan, you need to be pulling for – you really have no one that you want to win that game, but Louisiana Tech would be the more viable option of the two because Old Dominion's right there in that same spot as Ole Miss in first 4 out. So you don't want Old Dominion getting any momentum to possibly steal that bid over Ole Miss. And then Southern Miss and Texas San Antonio will be coming up after that one. Again, 6-6, Old Dominion is tied up with Louisiana Tech. And, of course, in the SEC, it is going to be Kentucky and LSU going at it. And in the bottom of the first, they're just now started their scoreless in that one. The winner of that game goes on to play Tennessee a little bit later on tonight. So that is where we're standing right now, edge of your seat, along with the rest of the team. And, Ole Miss has got a lot of work that they need done to help them get in to the NCAA tournament. If you ask anybody on the team, and really if you ask me, I think resume-wise, not trying to be a homer here at all, I think they've probably done enough, but it's going to be a matter of what happens on the bubble. And this is the unfortunate part about getting to Hoover and going one and done and losing on Tuesday night and having to watch all these other teams that were right there in the same scenario end up continuing on to play in Hoover. They got the break from Alabama. Now they need the break from Kentucky. I know it's hard as Ole Miss fans to root for teams like Texas A&M and LSU, but you got to root for those kind of teams to knock out these bubble contenders. Florida at this point doesn't matter. They were already in the tournament. If they beat Texas A&M, that has no effect on Ole Miss whatsoever. And then if you look at the Tennessee game, that one really matters as if it's Kentucky. If LSU wins this afternoon, then Ole Miss is good as far as the SEC teams are concerned. None of those other games would really matter. The more LSU wins, the better it makes that sweep look. That's about all you have at this point to look forward to in the SEC. Stay tuned on social media as the day goes on. I will be doing my best to keep you guys updated on scores throughout the day, particularly in those Conference USA games and the LSU Kentucky game, so that we kind of have an idea of what's going on. And then Chris and I will still be having a show for you Monday. We'll have a selection show, spectacular of some kind. We'll be live during the selection show, and we'll kind of break things down. And if Ole Miss gets in, we'll talk about their potential matchups. If they don't get in, we'll talk about what's next for Ole Miss baseball coming up in the offseason. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Appreciate all your comments and questions, and we'll keep an eye on it for you. Hotty toddy, let's hope for the best today, and hopefully we'll still have the Rebels in the postseason come Monday. Have a great afternoon.